You ever stood in the middle of a big piece of land and had absolutely no idea where your property line actually was? Yeah, it's more common than you'd think. Hey, welcome back to the Land Buyer's Guide. I'm Scott Thomas with landparker.com, and today we're talking about GPS, specifically how it's become one of the most genuinely useful tools a rural landowner can have. Whether you already own land or you're getting ready to buy your first piece, this stuff is worth knowing. So let's just get into it. One of the first things people deal with when they own rural land is figuring out exactly where their property ends and someone else's begins. And it sounds simple, right? Like there should just be markers or a fence or something. But the reality is old survey stakes get buried, wooden posts rot out, fence lines shift over the years. And sometimes the fence that's standing has nothing to do with the actual legal boundary. GPS apps have made this a lot easier to work through. There are tools out there, OnX Land, LandGlide, BaseMap, that let you pull up your parcel data right on your phone, overlaid on satellite imagery. So you can literally be standing on your property, look down at your screen, and see where you are relative to your boundary line in real time. That's pretty powerful when you think about it. Now, I want to be upfront about something here. Those apps are pulling data from county records, and county records aren't always perfectly up to date or totally precise. So what you're seeing in the app is a really solid reference point, but it's not a legal survey. If you're making a big decision, like putting a structure close to a boundary line or dealing with a neighbor dispute, that's when you want to bring in a licensed land surveyor. The app gets you oriented. A surveyor gives you the legal answer. But for everyday use, for walking your land, getting a feel for where things are, understanding your property in a way that's visual and intuitive, these tools are fantastic. Here's something I'd suggest to anyone who's in the process of buying rural land. Before you close, download one of those parcel apps. A lot of them have free versions. And if you can, go out and walk as much of the boundary as you reasonably can. See if what's on the ground matches what the app is showing. You might find a fence that doesn't line up with the boundary. You might notice something that prompts a question worth asking before you sign anything. That kind of ground truthing is really valuable. Okay, so beyond boundaries, let's talk about just getting around on large acreage. Because if you haven't spent time on a 50 or 100 acre property, it can be surprisingly disorienting. Terrain looks totally different from the ground than it does on a map. The woods all start to look the same. You come up over a hill and suddenly you're not sure which direction you came from. GPS solves that problem. You can drop waypoints, basically just digital pins, at spots that matter to you. A water source, a potential building site, a gate, wherever you park the truck. And you can track your path as you walk, so you can find your way back or share that route with someone else later. If you're in an area with decent cell service, your smartphone with a good app handles most of this just fine. But if you're out somewhere more remote with spotty coverage, a dedicated handheld GPS unit, Garmin makes solid ones, is worth having. They don't rely on cell signal, and they're built to take a beating outdoors. Now, GPS isn't just for navigating and finding your boundary lines. It's actually a really useful planning tool too, especially if you're thinking about developing your land in any way, homesteading, off-grid living, putting up a structure, that kind of thing. Understanding how water moves across your property is a big one. Where are the low spots? Where are the ridge lines? Are there areas that might collect water seasonally? GPS apps with topographic layers help you visualize all of that. And knowing that ahead of time can save you from a pretty expensive mistake, like putting a foundation or a garden in a spot that floods every spring. When you're planning where to put a driveway or an access road, GPS lets you measure distances, get a sense of elevation change, and map out the most efficient path before you ever break ground. Some of these apps will even let you calculate acreage for specific zones on your property, which is handy if you're planning pastures or food plots, or just trying to understand your land at a more detailed level. And here's a practical one. If you're hiring contractors out on your land, being able to share a GPS pin of the exact location you're talking about is a game changer. Instead of saying, it's kind of past the big oak tree, take a left at the creek, you just drop a pin and send it. Saves everyone time. The thing is, you really don't need to be a tech person to use any of this. These apps are designed for people who spend time outdoors, not people who sit in front of computers all day. The interfaces are pretty intuitive. You can get comfortable with the basics pretty quickly just by messing around with a free version on a piece of land you know well. A good way to start? Just download a parcel app and pull up your property on satellite view. Walk your driveway while it tracks your path. Drop a pin at your house or a landmark you care about. Poke around the topographic layer and see what your land's elevation looks like. That's it. No pressure, no complicated setup, just getting familiar with the tool. Once you spend a little time with it, it really does change how you relate to your land. There's something cool about standing somewhere on your property and knowing exactly where you are, what's around you, and where your lines are. It makes the land feel more real, more yours. Here's my overall takeaway. GPS has become one of those tools that rural landowners, whether you've had your property for 20 years or you're buying your first parcel, can genuinely benefit from. It helps you understand your boundaries without having to rely on old stakes that may or may not be where they're supposed to be. It keeps you from getting turned around on large acreage. It helps you plan smarter, and it makes working with other people, surveyors, contractors, neighbors, a lot clearer. It's not a replacement for professional guidance when things get serious, but as a day-to-day companion on your land, it's hard to beat. If you're in the market for rural land and you're not sure where to start, come visit us at landparker.com. We specialize in rural vacant land with some really accessible owner financing options, sometimes as low as $100 down and $100 a month. We try to make land ownership possible for people who don't have a huge chunk of cash sitting around, and we're always adding new properties. Head over to landparker.com, browse what's available, and if you have questions, reach out. We're happy to help. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.